Welcome to Flak for another week. We have as our guest today the immortal, the legendary, he laughed at that, Stefan Arngrim. And as you will see by the graphic behind Mark, he was one of the stars of the late lamented Irwin Allen production Land of the Giants, which I remember clearly from my childhood, and I'm sure most of my friends do too. And anyway, welcome, Stefan.
Well,
We are
thank you very
so
much,
happy.
Melody. Thank you, Mark. Thank you both. Great to be here.
Let's catch everybody up with you on. You're now in New York.
I am.
And your writing. I know you've also had a career in music for quite some time.
Yep. Yeah.
And so bring us up to date. What are you doing now?
Well, I've been, like you say, I've been doing a lot of writing, and I'm partners with a producer up in Vancouver, and we've done some work together in the past. So we've been developing some projects. Some of them are mine, some of them come from other writers, but we've been developing projects, particularly for the limited series format, which I really like. I like the idea of being able to have the time to, to tell a story, have maybe 8 hours, 12 hours to tell a story. I think that's a great format, and it certainly has caught on. And it reminds me of Berlin Alexanderplatz by Fassbinder and stuff. That kind of
Right.
long format, big movies, but because they're separated. And now everybody binge watches stuff, so it's kind of a good idea. So we've been working on that, and then I sort of got intrigued with one aspect of a story that we had in this treatment, and I just thought, well, you never know. Some things are movies, some things are TV shows, some things are a song, some things are a performance, some things are a book. So I just started writing on this subject, and it just evolved, and it was really just a collection of short stories. But I noticed after a while that they were all thematically tied, and even some of the characters kept showing up in the story. So it became a book, and so that's really what I've been working on right now. Is well, actually, one of my favorite parts is really diving in and doing research. And I know research has a lot of baggage. It sounds like sitting in dark rooms with you. No, I really like learning about these things, and that's why I've always liked the internet, is because that's kind of the way I think. It's link to link to link to link. This thing
Have
leads to
you
that thing.
have you gone into the AI zone yet?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You
I
bet.
I love it.
Oh yeah. It's terrific. I actually I'm using the GPT chat for some
Right.
things in the book. It's all credited to AI. I'm not using them, but it's interesting because it's almost reminds me of well, one of the way I'm using it is taking something from a particular chapter or story, something like that, feeding it into GPT chat, seeing what it comes up with, and then because of the way this story works, which is a lot about Cold War intelligence and stuff, I can have different versions. I can have one version of what what I'm saying really happened, and then what's clearly an artificial intelligence version of what's happened, which of course is very different. And it works within the plot. But I no, I really enjoy it. I think it's terrific. I haven't tried out Google's AI yet, but yeah,
Well,
it's
from what I understand, I'm sorry.
no,
I
no,
have
no.
trouble hearing
I
through
know.
the speaker.
That's why I
Um,
have headphones
yeah, yeah, I've got to do that. But the I've lost my train of thought. We were
on.
talking about
AI,
that. Yeah,
artificial intelligence.
the I had an incident with it last week that I was writing up a piece on Richard Belzer, the
Oh
late
yeah.
great, and I it, you know it sort of gave me all of his relatives' names for the
Yes.
obituary. And I said, well, what about Henry Winkler? And it said there is no connection between. And then there was a pause.
Yeah.
On second thought,
Really? Corrected itself.
been informed that, of course,
Well,
he
that's
was his cousin. So
Now he
That's
was in
the-
Sha Na Na, wasn't he?
who?
Richard Belzer, wasn't he in Sha
No,
Na Na?
no.
Okay.
He was the actor who played Munch on every TV
Yeah.
show in the world.
Who
And a
was that
terrific-
was in Sha Na Na? He had a name similar
Bowser.
to
Bowser.
that.
Bowser,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I'm thinking of.
No, Richard
Belzer,
Belzer is.
Bells was a great stand-up guy for years and years and years. I used to see him at the Comedy Store in LA all the time. My father was managing a number of comics in the 80s. So I was there a lot. And yeah, Belzer was a great guy. He was a good comic.
He was a good man, too. He had a good heart.
Yeah. Oh, he could pretty rough on the surface sometimes, but he was a real sweetheart, actually.
I mean, nice is cheap. Yeah, nice goes a long way. But a good person is a different thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so I caught the AI being wrong for about.
Wow, I like that it corrected itself, though. But see, I think right now, that's effectively what it is. It's a really, really comprehensive and incredibly fast search engine. And that's really all it is at this point.
Yeah.
It's just you're putting in this, your question, your statement, whatever, and then it's just searching every database on every server in the world in nanoseconds. And then compiling this information. The neat trick is that it's actually able to reword it and restructure it. It's not lifted. And I've run all those checks. I've checked all the possible pages and sources and everything. And it's very, very clever. I mean, it's not a copy paste thing. It is definitely phrasing this in a way that it seems to feel this is the information you want, but it's everything. I mean, so it's not a sentient being. I mean, I don't think anyone has to be afraid of GPT chat, This isn't,
well, the government is using AI for this drone thing that they're doing. And did you hear what they named it?
no,
Skynet.
Oh, yes, I did hear that. Isn't that great? Well, those guys...
Fate.
Those guys over at the CIA have a hell of a sense of humor, I'll tell you. Now, part of a lot of the stuff I'm writing is involves the company, as we call it, and a lot of it actually MK Ultra and a lot of the stuff that happened during the Cold War, which is also still going on today and is involved in artificial intelligence and DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research project, where they make weapons, has a lot of interesting stuff they're working on in AI, and they're also working on some interesting neuro implants that would connect your brain to a quantum computer theoretically, and I think they can do it with a standard computer now, and actually read and write information. So it almost becomes like a matrix thing where you could just get all the information on the helicopter and you'd know it. Now, I don't think you'd be able to fly it, but you would know how to fly it. So they're doing things like that, and it is mind control, and it's that never-ending search for the Manchurian candidate that they seem to have been obsessed with since the early 50s, well, since the Second World War.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are talking about writing and talking about AI. I read something that Stephen King was programming an AI to write his books for him.
Who would know?
Well, for years, he trained a bunch of young writers to write for him. And then he would go over the passages and correct things he didn't like. And that's why he was able to come out with 5 or 6 novels a year. I mean, who could write 5 novels a year?
Yeah, that's actually that's a long-standing tradition for a lot of artists. I mean, particularly like painters. That's famous. I mean, guys like David, the French painter, he had a whole staff, and they had this big skylight in his studio, and it made these square panes on the floor. And what he would do is that he would give his team his rendering, and they would break it down into these squares, just do little sections, and then put them in the light under the squares, and then connect them all and paint them in. And of course, Andy Warhol had a big staff of silk screeners. So and I've heard of writers, particularly big pop writers, who are knocking these things out. Sure, yeah, I mean, they give people treatments and outlines and things, but they have other writers. But now, of course, with AI, you really save a few dollars.
You'll read it. Yeah. Well, although I say it's not going to. Humans bring a nuance to that just isn't going to be there with AI. But
no. It's interesting what it does, though, because I had one thing, and I won't get into it because it's too complicated. But I had this idea that I was working on, and I just wanted to see what chat would do with this, what the AI would do with this. So I just put in this scenario, and it was very interesting because it came back with this thing about Alice in Wonderland. Because I phrased it kind of like as a bedtime story kind of thing, or a fairy tale, and so it came back with all this really interesting interconnected Alice in Wonderland stuff, which brought it to the main character, which in this case was just a little white rabbit. But it figured out White Rabbit, Alice in Wonderland, fairy tale, this, and then it got into some really interesting stuff which I hadn't even thought of. But it's fascinating how it does it, because it doesn't. I mean, no, it's never going to replace what a person can do, because we don't even know what that is. But
exactly.
but I think it's fascinating, and it is learning. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I've noticed just in the past few months that it's getting a lot. I don't know if you call it smarter, but quicker at putting things together. And like you said, it was actually able to correct itself and tell you that it was correcting itself
and apologize.
Whoops! Yeah, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So that's good. That's good news for artificial intelligence. It's polite.
One thing I have noticed is that it has become very conscious of itself.
Yeah,
in a sense, and mainly because, for instance, I was working on. I'm a writer also. That's what I know. And I was working on something that dealt with the laws of attraction, if you know.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I talked to them about the 7 laws of attraction and the subgroups, and and it wrote this whole thing about there is no scientific evidence. It's like, yeah, we know, spoil sport.
I know. I had this great, again, to do with this book, I had this great urban legend story that I found, which apparently has been going on for years and years and years and everything, that involves John Wayne and Joseph Stalin. And that supposedly Joseph Stalin really didn't like John Wayne. And so, according to the myth, he sent a KGB hit team to kill John Wayne. And this is in the 50s, and in Korean War. And the FBI finds out about it because Sergei Eisenstein and several other Russian filmmakers that are mentioned tell Wayne that because Stalin's a big movie buff, he knows these guys. He tells them, "I'm going to kill you," and they come back and they say, "Hey, Stalin's going to kill you," and then the FBI comes out, and the FBI goes there, and John Wayne and Yakima Canutt, the stud guy, brilliant stunt guy, did all that Ben-Hur stuff and everything. Hal Needham was his protege. Everything. They're in the house with. Oh God, I just forgot the writer's name. Conway, I forget, Jimmy whatever. Anyway, Wayne and he were good friends. And the FBI comes and they tell him the KGB is going to come and kill him for Joseph Stalin. And Wayne in the story says, well, you guys just set up a perimeter and we'll take it. And supposedly Wayne and Yakima Canutt and the writer kidnapped, get the drop on the KGB agents. Kidnap them, take them out to the beach, tie them up, put them on their knees, and fire off blank rounds next to their heads. Scare the hell out of them. The FBI comes in, gets the KGB guys. The KGB guys are so freaked out that John Wayne just, fake shot him in the head that they completely, they Finlandize completely, and they stay and they start working as counterintelligence agents for the FBI. Now, this story is amazing because it's been going on for years. There's also an addendum to it that while shooting, Hondo or something down in Mexico, there's another attack and Yakima Canutt saves his life or something. I mean, it's incredible. And I thought, this is just too funny. And I put it into GPT chat. And it was the longest pause. I just put in, the story about John Wayne and Yakima Canutt kidnapping and KGB agents, Joe Stalin, whatever. I forget what my keywords were, but the longest pause I've ever had on GPT chat. It went like about a minute and a half, which is a long time. And then it just came back very slowly and said, I'm sorry, I can find no information to support this story. And I thought, oh, perfect. I'm using it.
There you go. It doesn't know, nobody does. So there you go.
I figure, yeah, it's pretty thorough.
There's a wonderful story about D. Kelly. This will work us back into science fiction.
Okay.
D. Kelly, of course, was from that whole group of Westerns and
right, yeah,
initially, and DeForest Kelley and
DeForest Kelley, yeah.
He was out they were having some kind of big event, and everybody was there. And John Wayne was there, and he turned around and he saw the Star Trek group, and he comes walking over. And Shatner's all, oh, he's going to come up and talk to me because I'm the star. And of course, he goes right past Shatner. He goes up and hugs D.
Yeah. No, see, all those guys, their best friends were all stuntmen and the horse guys and the,
background players.
Yeah, they didn't hang around. Yeah, the supporting guys and everything. That's who they hung out with, And,
well, since Melody mentioned William Shatner, Melody told me a little story and about why you didn't do Star Trek.
Okay, well.
And I would like to hear that story.
Okay, well, I'm not referring to the original Star Trek. The original Star Trek, of course, I didn't do because I just wasn't right for anything. And actually, I was in the middle of a lot of work at that time. And that actually references something else we were talking to about Westerns. And anyway, that's sort of my line on it. I don't really have any evidence that anybody said, anybody at Star Trek casting said, oh, what about Stefan Arngrim? And no, but I just sort of assumed it was a weird story. I did a guest star on a T.J. Hooker episode and in about 1981, 82. And my parents, who, of course, were actors in the business and all that stuff, were in Toronto, and they knew Shatner because they were all in the same theater company, Tyrone Guthrie's company and stuff like that. Stratford, Ontario, a lot of Shakespeare. And Canada's not, it's physically large, but even today, it's not the population of California. So, everybody really does know each other. And so my dad says to me before I'm, the day before I'm going, he says, listen, when you get on set, and you see Bill, say hi for your mom and I. And I said, oh, okay, great, sure, fine. So I got on set, and actually the first couple of days, Shatner wasn't there. It was just me and Ike Eisenman doing all these scenes together. See, Ike was in a Star Trek movie. Okay, see, this is my case. Anyway, so so on about the third day, Shatner arrives. And now, I got to put this in context. This is T.J. Hooker, and this is his first big shot back after some really, really rough years in between the cancellation of Star Trek and, into the early 70s. And, and it is tough. I mean, anybody who creates that kind of iconic character on a TV series, if it goes away, they're probably not going to work for a while because it's Captain Kirk. That's all he is. He's not anybody else at that point. So that, I dealt with that on Giants too. Everybody does. So, Hooker was really important to him. You could just tell he was just he was intense about it. I'm really glad to see that in the last, 20 years or so, he's really developed a wonderful sense of humor and has said and I was interested in the stuff he said after he went to space. But, okay, so that's the context. He's a little tense and very focused. And so I go up, and we got this scene together coming up. I go up, I introduce myself, and Stefan Arngrim, and my folks from Toronto, and I think you know him, Thor Arngrim and Norman McMillan, and he wasn't even looking at me, and then he kind of looked over to the side, and I said, yeah, Toronto, Ontario. I was getting the silence was like actors, people, and there was nothing. There was just nothing. I could tell he was just somewhere else. And he kind of went, "Oh, yeah, well, yes, say hello for me." Okay, you bet. And so it was a little awkward to begin with, and then we just sort of had one mishap after another. And we had a scene outside where we had to exchange gunfire, firing full load blanks, and unfortunately, it was a day where all the network executives from NBC came out to the Warner's lot to watch that filming of the show, and they all brought their teenage daughters and things, so they could say, that's what Daddy made," and that I guess proved to be a pretty big distraction for Bill, and so he wasn't exactly where he was supposed to be at certain time. I mean, it just this whole scene got messed up, and I wound up firing him. I hit my mark. I'm sorry. I hit my mark. I turned around. I fired just like I was told, and I didn't know anybody was in the way. Anyway, so no one got hurt. It was fine. But I sort of had to stop and think, I just unloaded a bunch of full load blanks right in the direction of Captain Kirk dressed like a policeman. And I think there's a special circle of hell for that. But so, and it was just kind of an embarrassing situation. And then we had another thing with, I stole a truck, big 5-ton thing, cube truck. I'm driving this cube truck, and of course, T.J. Hooker, true to character, jumps on the side of the truck and tries to grab me in the thing. And I have a rubber gun. and I'm supposed to get him off the side of the truck while I'm driving the truck. And there's a camera guy with an Aeroflex over here strapped to the passenger side outside. He's standing on shooting this thing. And Shatner won't let go of and it's him. It's not a stunt guy, because we're only doing like 10 miles an hour, so in this parking lot. And he won't let go. And so I went bang, and I smacked him on top of the head with the rubber gun. And I guess the piece wasn't really glued on, and it kind of came off with the gun, and he fell off the truck, and which I don't think was really planned. But anyway, so again, I hit Captain Kirk dressed as a policeman with a rubber gun and knocked his wig off. So, and it went downhill from there. So. Yeah, so I always say, I said this, actually it was a British magazine I was talking to a few years ago, and I told this story to it, and they're the ones who said, that's why you've never done a Star Trek film.
Yeah.
And they printed a great page. It was one of my favorite pieces of press. They printed a little picture. It was about 7 pages. It was a nice piece and lots of pictures. But the last page had a picture of Bill Shatner, and the caption underneath said, Shatner, not a fan.
Well, almost everybody that guest starred on Land of the Giants was in Star Trek at one time or another.
Yeah, except there you go. Okay, again,
Don Marshall was a key member of Star Trek.
A blue shirt, even not even a red shirt, gonna die guy. The blue shirt.
He was, and Roddenberry first used him on his original show that he wrote, which was The Lieutenant.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He did an episode with Nichelle Nichols that never aired because it dealt with racism.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The network refused to air it.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating. See, all these years, I didn't know that. Yeah, Don he was right in the middle of that when in the 60s when television was trying to kind of catch up but not offend anybody by, starting to have Black people interacting like normal people on television, and not always totally normal. I mean, I remember Diane Carroll's show, because Don and Diana went out together for years. Julia, which was really a breakthrough thing. Except, my God, a nurse's apartment. Did you see that apartment she was living in?
Yeah, right.
Wow, and the flows. Oh. And the
but nurses now make good money. At the time that series was made, that wasn't the case.
No,
but
no.
I'll tell you, Stefan, I've watched about 10 episodes of Land of the Giants. I watched it when it was on originally, but that was a while back. And I'll tell you, you and Gary Conway were the two best actors in it.
Oh, geez. Wow, that's very nice.
The only reason that they had Kurt Kasner on that show is because they were looking for another Dr. Smith.
Yeah,
that's basically what he was Dr. Smith.
Yeah, Irwin was fond of the formula, and why not? Really, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And he clearly had a not broke formula, and so yes, I mean, I swear, Bill Mooney and I were friends because we went to school together a lot on the Fox lot, and we were also shooting right next door to each other. Lost in Space last season shot on 17 up on the hill, and then 18 and 19 were ours because they were the biggest stages. So,
you guys used to go over there and pull props from the Lost in Space and use them on your show.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure we didn't use some of their scripts, to tell you the truth. Bill and I used to compare them sometimes and say, what'd you just shoot? And he'd tell me, I'd say, that's funny, we're shooting that next week. And with big people.
I've met Billy Mooney about 7 or 8 times at different conventions. My wife and I used to sell sci-fi related toys at the conventions. And a lot of times the actors would come around before the show would start.
Sure.
And chat with everybody. In fact, I saw Billy Mooney at the very last convention that Jonathan Harris did before he died.
Yeah.
And they were right next to each other, and you could tell they were good friends.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that was true actually of certainly of Lost in Space and Giants is that the cast and crew and everybody, we really all were very friendly, and everybody got along very well and remained so. I talked to Gary frequently. As a matter of fact, I got to give him a call this afternoon. It's so weird now that there's only 3 of us left. There's Heather and Gary and me. That's it. And
Well, Heather didn't get a lot to do in that show, I noticed.
She didn't want a lot to do. I gotta tell you, Heather was great. She was only 19, 20 years old when she did that. She was a contract player. She was signed to Fox. They basically deal with Irwin and Ken Productions, which was Irwin and Fox was, you shoot the show here and we'll pay for this and do that and everything. But when you get a contract player, you do that. So that's how Heather really got on the show. She was amazing. I have never met before or since anybody who cared less about the business and being on TV. It meant nothing to her. She wanted to do musicals and things. She had a beautiful voice, a great singer. She's put out several CDs in the intervening years. And that's why she was there in the first place. So we would constantly, she would just leave. I mean, we'd be in the middle of a whole group shot, that great group shot, all 7 of us standing there, look nonchalant. And we'd look around and somebody would say, where's Heather? And the director would say, I don't know, where Heather? And then the ADs would run around and they'd look around, and then they'd start getting on the phone, and then they'd check her dressing room, and then this. And finally, somebody would this actually did happen once, I forget who it was, got her on the phone. She was at home baking cookies. And when they said, well, Heather, we're kind of in the middle of a shooting day and you're in this shot, her response was, you don't need me in that shot. I don't say anything. I'm just standing there. You don't need, I don't have to be there. I'll bring some cookies back, though. How many do you, she just didn't care. And she used to do this all the time. You don't need me for that. That's, let Deanna do that line. That's fine. I don't,
Boy,
you know what?
Unusual.
I watched the very last episode, and I noticed you're hardly in it.
Oh, yeah. I got a few.
They talk about you a lot, but you're only seen right at the very end by the cave.
That's right. That's okay. I had a guarantee on every show, so, it was all right. I got a week off.
I was watching that, and they could very easily have edited that episode and made you guys get home.
Yeah,
but I was wondering why somebody hasn't done that, because they had that servo actuator, which supposedly could transport you anywhere. A servo actuator, anybody who doesn't know technical stuff, all that means is a switch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's all a servo actuator is.
Yeah, but servo actuator sounds great,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There were actually a couple of shows where there was sort of opportunities presented and then denied kind of thing. And I think that was just, you want these shows, when you're doing these things, you want them to run as long as possible. And the golden number in those days was 5 seasons. If you could get to 5 seasons, you were good, because that was good for everybody, the producers, the actors, everyone, because 5 seasons was enough for syndicated stations to run an episode every day and all that. If you had less than 5, that was difficult for them to do. That's why Giants didn't really run in syndication here for years. It did in England, oddly enough. I don't think it's ever been off the air in the UK. It's really strange. But we borrowed a lot of stuff from, you mentioned earlier, we were talking off camera about the Universal tour and seeing a lot of Land of the Giants props. And there's a justice in that, because that's where most of them came from, was Universal. And there was all kind. Irwin pillaged the town for anything, that was even close to 12-to-1 scale. That was Jeannie's phone. We just kept painting it. Things like thread and needles and the Incredible Shrinking Man. All sorts of films and TV shows.
Think about that. I remember that the spool of.
That's right.
That was what that was from.
Yep.
I remember that.
Yep. Yeah, it's a big deal in Incredible Shrinking Man. Yeah.
Have you seen the Land of the Giants DVD box set?
I've seen. I saw the big one that they put out here. which is like somewhere in $250 or something.
Well,
yeah.
the box is the box
cage
they always captured you guys in.
God. Those boxes and those drain
that was
pipes.
pretty clever. And you notice, I noticed all the boxes have the same latch.
Yep.
They pulled the latch off of whatever the other box was and stuck it on.
Yes,
the
well,
other one.
Giant Land was, had a limited economy and not a lot of patents. They just kind of found something that worked, and they just kept doing it. That was the funny thing about it when you were talking about the first season. I'm sorry, Melanie. What were you saying?
No. Go ahead.
We were talking a little bit before. First season, there was a lot of. It was very difficult for them to figure out exactly how to get the Giants to behave. There was a lot of physics discussions going on.
Giants just don't behave.
Initially, because of some confusion, they had the Giants, of course, moving very slowly and ploddingly. They also didn't speak English, and you couldn't understand them because their voices were so loud they were unintelligible, and they had a different writing that looked a lot like Korean, frankly. And you see it on posters. And they didn't really know how to deal with that, and it took a long time, and it was kind of a halfway between making it work, making some sense out of it, but also making it work just as a TV show. And I think that's eventually what happened is that Irwin and all the staff up there just said, let's just forget all of this and just make this, a fun show with, and the Giants are just the bad guys, and that, and adding people like, God, I just want to put Kevin, who played Inspector, what's his name? The SID. And Kevin Hagen. Kevin Hagen was really, I think, a really important character. And I think really, really brought the Giants and the little people kind of together more than they were. And we were so detached for the first season. And I think they just finally said, look, we're not doing a science show. We're doing a science fiction show. So that's, I think, what happened. And I think it was a good idea. And it worked. It was a lot easier to do in the second year, too.
You guys had some great character actors in that show.
Some of the best.
Paul Fix. I forget the gentleman's name that played the grandfather that had the town.
Oh, Percy Hilton. Well, yeah, Percy Hilton.
He did a ton of Disney voices and all sorts of stuff.
See, I just love character actors and guys like that. I just, and it was difficult on our show because if you guessed it, on our show, the little folks, we were way up on the hill in 18 and 19, and the Giants were way down the hill on another part of the lot on stages 5 and 6. We're on platforms. So as you pointed out, they just shoot them on Western dolly from the ground. And so we didn't meet a lot of guest stars. You had to intentionally go. You had to find a time in the day, maybe go at lunch, something like that. We didn't even eat together, right? So you had to make plans. And Percy Hilton is one of the people. When I found out he was guesting on the show, I found some time and went over and met him because I loved him since I was a kid, and he's just such a familiar face and so consistent. And John Carradine I made some time to go meet him.
Yeah.
And
how about Jonathan Harris? Did you?
Oh yeah, well, Jonathan, I saw him quite a bit. He was he was terrific.
You're shooting next door to each other, so. Yeah.
No, he was great, and he and Kurt had fun together too. And Kurt was terrific. I mean, yes, Kurt was, of course, a formula choice for Irwin, but Kurt was a terrific actor and probably one of the more professional people. This is a guy who has performed on stages across Europe and done
musical
huge movies and stuff like that. And he he was amazing on that. He was a real anchor for the show, because I mean sometimes things could get a little silly, and and Irwin could be quite a taskmaster, and he was I always think Irwin Allen directed The Crash, which was the first episode of the show, and he did it. He took 18 days to do it. Now that's a long time for a 1-hour show. I mean, you generally are talking about 7 days.
Yeah.
We afterwards with Harry Harris, we alternated directors for a long time. Harry Harris and Sobey Martin, both great guys. Because of all the stuff we had to do, the show did run long. So we generally brought them in like somewhere between 7 and 9 days. And we never heard the end of it. I mean, Irwin would go crazy like on day 5, about it. And you couldn't help but remember that, we did, the first episode was interminable. It just went on forever. So
yeah, it did, Ken.
Irwin sometimes, would apply certain hard, fast rules that he didn't necessarily follow himself, but that's the way it goes.
They never do.
Yeah.
Now, Melody and I discussed something before you came on. We were talking about that dog and how much you carried that dog around. Yeah. Did we ever have any sanitary issues with that dog?
No, actually. Well, actually, there was one time. But that was 3 dogs, really. And the dog you see me carrying most of the time was named Chipper, was a female cockapoo, which apparently are really good breeds to train. And was trained by big animal, affiliated with Rudd Weatherwax, and who did Lassie and all that. And the trainer herself was a wonderful woman named Betty Burke, who handled the dogs. And there were 3. There was Chipper, there was Chip, and Little Chip, and they were both males, and they did things like stunt work and and running, barking, and climbing on things. And Chipper had the real choice job, because I just had to carry her around and put her down, pick her up, take her around. And she did pee on me once, but I may have deserved that. I don't know. Now we got along well, but yeah.
Well, we figured as long as the shots, the shooting takes sometimes, that the poor dog might not have had a chance to get away.
Yeah. No, I think the only thing that was confusing for poor Chipper, which Betty had to work on, is that the our spaceship set and everything was in a forest, and most of the bulk of it, the foundation of it, was all builds and things and big styrofoam tree stumps. But we had a force of guys on our crew that we referred to as the Green Men, and that was their job, was to take all these potted palms and ferns and things like that and load them in on that set. Those were all real plants, and then cover up the pots with all this stuff and make it look like a big jungle. And then they brought in a dump truck, and they always laid out nice fresh dirt for us at least once a week. Very thoughtful. And I think that was confusing for all the Chippers, because there was this like indoor outdoor, and I think sometimes they thought, what, not by this tree, but that one's all right. And so it was, I know I would have been confused by that. But no accidents I'm aware of. I don't think I'm sure if anybody had stepped in anything, we would have heard about it.
Oh yeah.
Well, I played on our Facebook group. I played a fan film where a gentleman tours the Spindrift.
Oh wow.
They used a miniature, and they did a pretty good job of green screening this guy into the miniature.
Oh,
and he
great.
walks around, and then they show some clips of you guys in the engine room of the Seaview.
Really?
Yeah, one of the sets you guys used was part of the engine room of the Seaview on Lost in or on Boys from Out of the Sea.
See, Irwin knew how to stretch a dollar. And
Well,
yes, I now
used...
remember what you're talking about. And see, there was no engine room on the Spindrift. And everything from that back door that you see, there's nothing there. And there never was. And so anytime we had anything that had to happen in some other place, they just built a set on the stage, and it was always back there. If you really took all those rooms and added them together, the Spindrift would have been, a couple of football fields long.
It's like the TARDIS.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Doctor Who. But,
yes.
The TARDIS is much bigger on the inside than it is on the outside.
Yeah.
So.
It's exactly.
That reminds me, Irwin Allen must have gone to the Dan Curtis School of Directing.
See, it's funny, I saw that when I looked up your site and everything, and I saw all this, all of your Dark Shadows stuff.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, see, I didn't really get to watch Dark Shadows when it was on because I was working, it was on 4:00 in the afternoon. I was, and then even after Giants, things I was just very, very busy. So I didn't really get an opportunity to watch the show. I knew about the show, and Jonathan Frid's another one that, Canadian, Toronto, and my parents and so on. So I didn't get, but my fiance Claire is a huge Dark Shadows fan, knows a lot of these people, and has, worked a lot of conventions and stuff like that. And we have a Roku set up, and that Dark Shadows has their own channel on Pluto, and they have, you can call up any episode on Tubi, and, it's nuts. And there's probably at least 20, 30 other, streaming networks you can. So too much choice. But so I've been watching a lot, and Claire's been turning me on to a lot of Dark Shadow stuff, and there's certainly a lot. As a matter of fact, last night I watched the Collinsport Gang enter 1995 time band, where the house was a mess and apparently no one could remember their lines.
Yeah, exactly.
But that just doesn't. No, I love the show. I think it's great. It's like a wonderful, repertory company, and Curtis is just a genius for having figured that out for TV because, and I love when I see people do that, when they take a medium and twist it, and do something with it that nobody really thought of doing. And he did. He created this extraordinary repertory company, which explored just about every gothic romance and horror story that you can imagine. I mean, we're Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and we're over here on Tour of the Screw several times. And, extraordinary stuff. Curtis was brilliant. Dan Curtis was a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Stefan, do you have a copy? Does your wife have a copy of the Dark Shadows Companion?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, because Melody was involved in the production of that.
Really?
I wrote it.
Yeah,
wow.
She didn't get to put her name on it because somebody else
My name's on it.
Well, no, but I mean, it's not listed as written by you, even though it was written by you. She kind of goes through it.
It was published by Catherine Lee Scott's company.
Oh, okay.
She played Maggie and Joseph.
Yeah.
And
sure.
So she and I kind of went shoulder to shoulder and wrote and created the thing. But
wow.
when I was a youngster, in my teens, I ran Grayson Hall's fan club.
No kidding! Wow.
Yeah, and so I knew.
She's terrific.
I know everybody. Pardon?
She's so terrific. She's terrific.
Oh,
I love watching her.
Yeah,
she makes the greatest faces. I'll tell you.
Bless her heart. She was just. There'll never be another Grayson Hall.
God, no. I don't think there could be.
No. Although
Universe
both of her grandsons, one of her grandsons is an actor, so.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And It's possible. But the my memory today, I've got Alzheimer's disease.
Well, I want to ask Stefan a question real quick.
Yeah,
were you involved at all during the time period when they were filming Time Tunnel?
No, I think we got there just after they wrapped, as I remember. Yes, because I remember going and looking at their stage where they were tearing everything down, and looking at the time tunnel and so no, I think we just got there right when they were wrapping that up. We got there maybe only a year before Lost in Space wrapped up. So yeah,
all of those shows I think of as a group, an aggregate, because
amazing, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
it's
it
true.
took up my childhood. That and Dark Shadows.
One of the conventions that I did had the cast of Time Tunnel. They had Robert Colson, James Darren, and Lee Merriweather. All three of them were there. And the one that played the blonde-haired doctor.
Oh, yeah.
I forget his name, but he was there also.
Terrible. Yeah, see, my memory, too. I can't.
Well, what I was going to say is I will send your lady a copy of the companion. I'll have Catherine send one.
Oh, that's very sweet. Yeah, she'll love that.
And it has everything up to 1990 that had to do with the show and the cast. And you actually get together with Matt Hall. Grayson's son lives in New York. And
really?
Yeah. And he's a great, really smart, very very involved in theater and writing and everything.
Ah, terrific. Oh,
he'd be a good fit. Yeah, exactly.
No, one thing I noticed, it is kind of unusual for a television series. Two of the cast members were married, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Don Matheson and Deanna Lund.
That's right.
It's kind of unusual. That must have caused some. Sometimes when maybe they weren't getting along real good and had to do a scene together. Those are the kind of things.
That was never the problem. It was getting them out of the dressing room to do the scene that was the problem.
Well, that's good. At least they were getting along anyway.
Oh yeah, they were getting along. They got along real good, and they met on that show, and it was quite amazing. Yeah, they fell in love right there on that show, and it was great.
There you go. And that has happened before, so it's
sure.
At least there's a.
In the last episode, I don't remember which one. One of the ladies cut a hole in the wall and stuck her head in there, and Don Matheson was in there, and he asked her where she'd been. Oh, I don't know. We were just me and Barry were just sitting around doing nothing, and we thought we'd bring you this ray gun. Who the hell wrote that?
I don't know. Gee, I can't remember that one.
Yeah, she had this. It was like a gun, and then he used it to solder wires together.
Yeah. Well, he was always doing that.
For that radio-controlled airplane.
They do.
Before we go, I got to ask you this.
Sure.
Gary Conway had one costume, and it kept getting cut up, burned, and everything, and then the next week it looked fine. Same thing with Matheson, you, and Don Marshall. But the two ladies had like all sorts of wardrobe. It was kind of like Gilligan's Island. They must have had 4 or 5 suitcases.
Well, of course.
Yeah, I commonly made that Gilligan's Island reference, and actually several people kind of got tired of hearing it. But yeah, we apparently had like one change of clothes, and And of course, my wardrobe like came directly from Sears, which was wonderful. And they paint in the second season. They painted my shoes green to match my pants. They painted them, and they were always coming. The paint was always coming off because they were sneakers, and so they were putting tape on them and stuff. Just bizarre. But yeah, and Deanna, it's a big deal in the first episode. She's got like 8-10 bags in the whole thing.
Yeah.
She only changed her clothes like once or twice.
Now the other question I have is, all the seats had seat belts, but none of them were bolted to the floor. What was that?
Yeah. Well, there's tons of stuff like that, And at first, you ask those questions and you say like, well, come on, really. Is it dangerous to be bolted in here if it's not bolted to the floor? And but then after a while, you just sort of remember. You go, wait a minute, what am I? I'm
now,
looking for. I'm on the land of the giants, for God's sake. I mean, who cares?
I'm sure you're familiar with the term spaceship acting, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed watching the show, especially in the first season, there's a couple of scenes where all of you went one way and then one of them went the other way.
Commonly.
That's funny. That's funny to watch.
Well, this is what Irwin used to do. He would do this: rock, roll, recover. That was the whole gag: rock, roll, recover. We had fun with that.
Well, at least they didn't have. You guys didn't have grips in the background tripping over the headstones and things like that.
We had plenty of that, but we had film and a lot of takes, and
you got to clip it.
But,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, people, fell out of the bushes, and whenever there's like a rig or any gag, you've got like grips and prop men and stuff hiding here and hiding there, and there's a camera up here, and I've seen people fall out of their little perches and stuff, right in the middle of the scene. So, it just happens. I always thought I love watching that it's because my first job when I was about 6 was a soap opera here in New York called Search for Tomorrow, which I did for about a year and a half, and that was like live. That was like the red light went on in the camera and everybody's watching, and we'd get those scripts like the same day sometimes, and I have to get them all down by like 11:30. And but I love watching Dark Shadows for that reason, because I know they had a sort of live to tape thing, so I mean they could make some amendments, but that's early days. You couldn't make. It's still 2-inch tape. That's difficult to fool around with and cut, and not if you're on a clock like that. I think they do so amazingly well with those kind of little faux pas and stuff. That whole cast is amazing that way. They just keep going no matter what. I mean, a line goes, the scene falls apart. It doesn't matter. Scenery falls down. They just, just keep.
I remember one episode with Jonathan Fred and I think it was Grayson Hall, where one of them has a phone in their lap, and they picked it up, and the phone rings, and he's holding the receiver, and you hear somebody say, "Keep going, keep going."
Yeah.
You actually hear him say that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you have to. See, that's the luxury of film is you just go back and do another one. But
Well, they'd go down to the local bar and they'd be sitting around after they shot, and they'd all be saying, "Oh, thank God, nobody will see that ever again."
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, little did they know.
Have you done anything recently where you're able to have one of those LED background things that they use now? The stages where
I've done some green screen stuff and a lot of that's interesting because I have found that doing Giants actually really prepared me for all the new tech changes. And I see a lot of other actors that I work with, particularly younger actors, really are unfamiliar with, and it takes them some time to kind of get a handle on it. But we were using at the time the sodium blue screen thing, which is like a film chroma key kind of deal, and a lot of matte shots and a lot of traveling mattes. And
well, that was very early. Star Trek was the first show to use blue screen.
Yep.
And that was 66, and you were just a couple of years after that. So
That's
you
right.
guys were pioneers in that kind of
in a lot of areas, actually, in that area. I mean, we had some extraordinary people work the effects on that show, like Art Cruikshank and L.B. Abbott. I mean, the big names who created a lot of the foundations for the technology that exists now. But yeah, I've done a lot of stuff with effects shots and things, and I'm just I got to tell you personally, I'm so happy about this whole. I mean, I'm not happy for what happened with the Alec Baldwin and Russ thing, but if anything good comes out of it, it's get this guns off the set, or at least get the blanks off, and no more squibs and all that stuff. I grew up with that stuff. It's terrible and it's dangerous, and it, and I've done several films since, not since Russ, but beforehand, in Canada, where we did just complete actor action thing, and it's just fine. As a matter of fact, it's better in some ways. I mean, you can wire it up with all these little explosive devices and blood bags and stuff. It's very distracting, and you have to kind of technically move with that. Now, you just simply do actor action. You take the hits, you do whatever you got to do. They're going to digitally put them in. They're going to digitally put in the muzzle flashes. We don't need to be firing off these, I mean, people need to understand that a blank cartridge does fire. It actually does fire a projectile.
Like paper wads or something, right?
Yeah, a little piece of tin.
They can hurt you. Obviously, because
killed.
Brandon Lee was killed with that.
Brandon's thing was a squib in the bag, apparently, which was loaded incorrectly. But that can happen too. I mean, these things, they're dangerous. They're explosive charges, and you see them when they put them on you. They put down a tape on a piece of styrofoam, and then tape on a piece of heavy leather, and then a piece of metal, and then this little thing that's going to go boom. No,
how many years since John Eric Hexum?
Yeah, and that was a quarter load. That was a quarter load blank. See, that wasn't even a full load. Full loads you generally use outdoors. Quarter loads you use indoors because it's just a little loud. But and he terrible. So I'm all for that. I think we don't have to. Nobody should die making a movie or a TV show.
Exactly.
Not worth it.
Well, Stefan, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes,
we're gonna have to wrap it up here because
we'll
be yelled at by the people at Facebook. we have an hour. They give you a couple of minutes, but otherwise, they start yelling at you. So I hope we can have you back again because this
absolutely anytime.
We literally ran out of time talking.
That's
about
okay. No, it's fun. I was like
wonderful.
Well, thank you very much. So are you guys. I like having this sort of, just surrender to the conversation thing. It's
Melody
nice.
and I both have entertainment backgrounds. I currently work for a company called Red Digital Cinema.
Oh, no kidding.
I don't know if you're familiar with us or not, but we produce the motion picture cameras for all the Marvel films were shot with our cameras.
With red cams?
Yeah.
Oh, you do the red
Digital
cam.
Cinema. Yeah.
Okay. I've worked on a couple of things with red cams and stuff. Great.
Yep. So we make those cameras.
Wow.
So, but
That's
anyway, thank you very much for joining us. And I'll let Melody wrap it up and close us out.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark.
We'll be back next week, and Mark and I will. And we will... I know we have a guest next week, and I've forgotten who it is.
That'd be a surprise.
But we'll tell you. We'll tell you.
Yeah.
If they don't show up, I'll come back. It's okay.
All right, Stefan.
Hey, I'll host.
You're welcome back. Yep, we're gonna hold you to that one.
Okay. Bless you. Have a great week, everyone.